What's a hobby that's dying in popularity? This might be a bit controversial, but since I do this, I'll mention it because that's how I feel. Playing drums. Real drums. MIDI is making us obsolete. Don't get me wrong. There are still applications for live drums, especially if you want the groove or feel of a live drummer, but bedroom music production has just skyrocketed even more due to the pandemic, and not everyone has enough space for a full acoustic kit. Yeah, drummers are like a dying breed in my local music scene. There are like 3 of them, all of them being in several bands already, and a crap ton of crappy guitarists. Seems like good players of every rock band type instrument rarely exist these days, and if there are some, they choose to play on their own on Instagram or YouTube with every other instrument replaced by MIDI and plugins. Ham radio. I remember as a kid listening to my dad's radio and him always having a good time and genuinely enjoying a good rag chew. I got my license and tuned into some of the local repeaters. Found some nets with the most depressing things I've ever heard. People talking about their terminal illnesses or how prescription costs are killing them. In college, one of my professors ran the ham radio club and gave us extra credit if we came to one meeting. I remember going and being extremely confused and unwelcome. Stamp collecting. It used to be a huge thing, but not anymore. Probably because of the rise of email, very few people send letters anymore. They have them at estate sales all the time for super cheap. I have my grandfather's collection and don't have any strong feelings for them. Been trying to find a collector for a few years to give them to. No one wants them around me. Postcard collecting. I buy a postcard of each place I visit. Some places I have visited in the world, very hard to find a postcard. Hardest country, as we're only here for a day on a cruise, Dominica. Have you tried with fridge magnets? There are everywhere. I'm surprised this hasn't come up, but China crystal collections. Another one would be sterling silver, tea sets, cutlery, etc. I think entertaining and hosting isn't as formal as it used to be, and people have less space for dishes. We put one set of china on our wedding registry, but didn't bother with crystal or silver. Those things are beautiful, but they're just not practical for me or as necessary as they used to be. In the UK it is 100% croquet. I know, what a cliche. When I was younger everyone had a croquet set and it was a great way to enjoy time with friends on a summer day in the garden. Whereas now I don't know anyone that still owns one. Maybe a strange one, but this question got me thinking. My friends and I played it some in high school. Probably started because we were bored one day and found the set in my friend's garage. We are in our 30s now and still play a good amount. Model trains. There is a store in our town square that has been there for like 50 years that specializes in model trains. It's called a train and toy store, but there are almost no toys there. The store is interesting to walk around in if you are not claustrophobic, but he must not sell very much because he can't pay the rent anymore. He is closing and moving out of town to some building he owns. Again, the stuff looks cool, but I have never seen anyone buy anything. Yes, these types of stores are closing like crazy in my area. I've had a few model train shops close up within the last year. Also, people are buying this stuff online now, so there is no need for these stores, if this is what people want to buy. Geocaching, which is weird because I still do it sometimes while biking around, but caching apps rarely alert me of any finders in the apps now. I put $20 in what used to be a super popular cache that people would visit daily like 15 years ago. I later turned, about 6 months later, and the same items including the $20 were in there. Pen pals. As a teenager, I loved writing letters to new people and receiving letters from all over the country and the world. Everything is instant now, but nothing beats that feeling of getting a letter in the mail that is specifically for you. That is not a bill, ad circular, and comes from someone that genuinely wants to brighten your day. Historical reenacting. Folks no longer want to play dress up in itchy wool and educate folks on whatever period was their jam. Its heyday was late 90s when you could find a group that did just about any period you could imagine. The one near me has all but died in the last few years because of funding. It used to be a weekend I would look forward to every year. Collecting all 50 US state minted quarters. I remember there used to be TV commercials selling you fancy cardboard with holes in them to help you collect them all. LOL. OHH, how times have changed. Yo, I had all 50 collected at one point, then my druggy aunt stole them. Did it again, then another druggy family member stole it. Did it one last time, my mom put it away for safekeeping, then when we couldn't find it we assumed someone took them. Indoor roller skating rinks. It is probably confirmation bias, but as a middle-aged male who used to rollerblade, I have noticed the aggressive rollerblade scene is making a wee comeback. Roller skating is a little. I have a very empty large building near me that I would love to refit as a roller rink and some indoor ramps and skate shop. General aviation. Being a private pilot, a series of lawsuits against plane manufacturers combined with insane certification requirements for airplanes and parts have made it so that buying new planes or replacement parts is ludicrously expensive for pretty much anyone earning less than $500,000 per year. Old used aircraft from the heyday of the 60s 80s had been filling the void to an extent over the years, but they are starting to get really worn out and people feel less and less comfortable flying them as time goes on. And unfortunately there's just no replacements as they age out. As an example, a brand new Cessna 172 in 1969 cost $12,500. About $90,000 in today's money. Today, a 2021 model would cost around $400,000. I've got a PPL and it's sort of lonely. Most people are either old dudes who have been flying for decades, or young people getting their hours as fast as possible so they can get into the airlines. Very few people like me who just fly because they like it. Fortunately I do like it and enjoy it even as a solo activity, but I do wish I had more of a community. Flying radio-controlled helicopters and airplanes. Why would someone want to deal with all the hassle of flying a model helicopter that is insanely difficult to fly when they can buy a DJI drone that has a first-person video stream, records video in 4K, and can fly around by itself via GPS? Drag racing, the vehicle kind. A major track in Georgia just got sold because of a local battery plant is being built nearby and the houses around it skyrocketed in value. Yet, my local drag strip has built a drift course next to it since drifting makes money hand over fist to be able to keep the facility open. Meanwhile it's a lot more expensive to prep a drag strip and the old boomers who drag race be and whine about $5 entry fee increases. Teacher here. Hobbies in general are dying. Here's part of why. I regularly meet parents who balk at the idea of their child doing something for fun. Unless it can translate to a career or a college application, it's viewed as a waste of time and money. And if it can translate to one of those, then there is crushing, constant pressure to be the best at it. We are raising a generation of children who cannot comprehend of hobbies. Interesting and heartbreaking. Not sure if it was a real hobby, but typewriting will die out eventually. The last typewriters factory closed some years ago. Ceramics. There used to be 2 or 3 shops in every small town where you could go, pick a piece, clean it. They would fire it for you, then go back a week later and paint it. They fire it for you again. Then you go and pick up your finished masterpiece. It was so refreshing. I'm 24. When I was a kid there was one pottery place across the street. I always wondered what it was but never got to go in. I can remember when they closed maybe 15 years ago. They still have all of the ceramic pieces from in the window on display. It looks like it's stuck in the past. The Rotary Club, the Elks, the Masons, the League of Women Voters, all kinds of fraternal organizations. Beyond that, participation in all kinds of civic organizations, churches, labor unions, sports leagues, hobbyist clubs are way down from previous generations. Americans used to be world renowned for their enthusiastic participation in clubs and civic organizations of all kinds. Now we're becoming an increasingly atomized society. The cost is that today the average American has fewer closer friends, is less likely to know their neighbors, and has less of an informal support network than at any points in history. One reason is that most of those organizations are hard to join unless you know someone already involved. I looked into joining the local Masons and there was no information about joining online. Their online presence looked like it was made back during Windows 95. I couldn't even find a time for a meeting to show up and ask about joining. Model trains. The hobby is absolutely dead. Entire train collections are being sold for literal pennies on the dollar. An engine that used to cost $500 may not even sell for $5. Oddly enough, a lot of my retired graffiti friends are into it. They buy trains and do graffiti pieces on them and trade collect. Not strictly dying but certainly becoming a bit more difficult. CD collecting. Right now CDs are in this weird purgatory where we can't decide if we're done with them or not. They've fallen out of favor in terms of practical usage. Most people use streaming services and many new cars don't come with a CD player as standard. They're not totally obsolete but they're nowhere near as popular as they once were. Many chain stores that specialize in entertainment products have also begun to scale back their stock both in store and online. Go to a CD section and browse popular, and for most artists they'll stock a generic greatest hits collection, their latest release, and if you're really lucky maybe some of their popular albums. Case in point, I wanted to add Rio by Duran Duran to my collection. It's one of the greatest albums of the 80s yet literally no chain stores in my area stocked it. You'd think that would be one that's in wide circulation but apparently not. The other annoying thing is they're not old enough to have garnered niche value yet. Vinyl is the new collector's trend. So there's loads of market stalls popping up selling vinyl as the in thing, but CD stalls at markets are dying. Which is a shame cause they were the guys to go to if you wanted to find rare albums. Vinyl is the new collector's trend. It's really weird, my local Walmart carries almost no CDs and now has a small section for vinyl records. Collecting spoons. I'm a teenager yet I often enjoy finding spoons at cool tourist attractions. My personal favorite is one I got from Prague during Christmas time. It has a revolving dice in the handle. My great uncle had 2 large frame type displays to display all of his decorative spoons. Based on young people I know, bowling, billiards and poker are fading. Board games was experiencing a boom until COVID. D&D is super popular again. Model airplanes. My pawpaw was a fanatic from childhood to death. We still have hundreds of boxes and already made planes to figure out what to do with. He was avid in groups and conventions. Every single group and gathering were men no younger than 50. It literally is dying off each passing year as the years go on and more members lost. At least in the area my pawpaw was in. Kite flying, one of the oldest hobbies. Kites were used for a lot of things since ancient times. I want to fly kites but there's not enough space in the city, or the right wind conditions sometimes. Sometimes I feel like today's hobbies are yesteryear's craftsmen. Blacksmithing, bow making, and coopering are all examples. It seems a lot of handcrafting arts are fading. Coopering as a hobby sounds hilarious. You just amass a large collection of barrels that I can't imagine are in high demand. Well crap, now what? Comic book stores have basically had to load the store up with trading cards, Funko Pops, and tchotchkes to survive, while the actual comic books get cast into a small corner. The Marvel and DC movies may make billions, but it's done zero to increase interest in the comics themselves. Having a materialistic hobby. Anytime something becomes popular they just raise the prices until the average person can't afford to do it anymore and prevents anyone else getting into it, even when it's not materialistic. I got back into birding recently and keep being asked why I don't have decent binoculars and camera. Sorry, using my eyes is part of the challenge I like and don't need to spend thousands on tech. Falconry. Highly regulated from state to state and a large upkeep cost in both money and time, but I'll be damned if it isn't cool as frick. I live in Northern California wine country, about 60 miles north of San Francisco, and around here, golf. Even though we have a huge footprint of retired people, all the local golf courses are slowly going under. Might be because a loop is like $120 during the week and $200 on a weekend. Local golf course just went up for auction. The neighboring farmer bought it, fenced it in, and put his cattle in it. I don't know if it's dying in popularity, but beekeeping has definitely undergone a shift in my lifetime. It used to be that every farm you drove past had a small hive or two tucked away somewhere. It was a side crop in the many crops that were grown. Now it's got a pretty large initial investment cost and you see more beekeepers that are young people with a garden in their backyard. It's expensive and time consuming and frequently puzzling. It's also occasionally painful and sometimes heartbreaking. I still love it, though. I'd love to keep bees, just because the bees need help, but I am unfortunately super terrified of bees. Can't believe I haven't seen this in the thread yet, but film photography used to be with a bit of work you could make a passable darkroom in a closet or your basement and develop your own film. The ease of digital photography was the first nail in that coffin in the late 90s early 2000s, but it lingered on for a while as the quality of digital sensors wasn't there yet. Now, digital DSLR has gotten to the point that it has all but killed anything short of the most hardcore film enthusiasts. There are many out there that will argue film still exceeds digital in some metrics, but regardless of those points, the industry and hobby has essentially collapsed. It also has got expensive. Film isn't cheap, plus you have to think more before taking a shot. Young cell phone photographers don't do that. Lastly, if you have a decent film SLR, the digital equivalent costs a fortune. Model railroading. Unfortunately, once called the world's greatest hobby, model railroading has become a dying hobby. The prices of models are expensive, and the younger generation can't afford them. Not to mention, in my opinion, trains just aren't as cool as they were in the golden age of steam and beyond. Most of the locomotives these days just look about the same as one another. I received a Lionel 027 set from my father, except my parents were divorced when I was 3 and I never knew him. But I found this box sometime around 1983 to 1984ish, with 2 locomotives, several cars, a gigantic 1940s era transformer and some pencil drawings of a future layout in the corner of our attic. There was no internet then, no Google, no Reddit, so I didn't know what I'd found. I asked my mom, my grandparents, who were still in the picture, aunts and uncles. No one really remembered my dad's interest in any of this stuff. Anyhow, I was at a library and found Model Railroading magazine. Model railroading is fun was the tagline of every issue on the cover. It captured my imagination. All those layouts, all those ideas and creativity, using coffee grounds for weathering, saran wrap to model water, how to make your own trees. For a kid growing with a single mom with limited resources, I found a channel to create my own world. I didn't have much, but I made the best of what I had. I figured out how to rewind the transformer, wire up those 3 Rail 027 tracks, sand down the junctions and create my first 4x8 layout in my room called the Alpine Lake and Pocono Junction. It was my escape. I've learned a lot of things since then, but I assimilate knowledge and experience as if I were trying to integrate it into a mister. It's how I relate. Whoa, that's a lot of words. Barbershop quarteting. For as long as I've been in the society, the membership prices and convention registrations have always been way too expensive for something you don't even need an instrument for. And there aren't as many conventions a year as I think there should be because it's probably just too hard to justify the administrative costs. There's a ton of us, just not enough to make the scene really shine outside of the really big events. Dirt bike riding. With the constant closure of areas to ride, rising prices on bikes used and new, and the boom and ease in riding using ATVs and UTVs, dirt bikes are being pushed out. Can't remember the last time I went out for a ride and saw more than 1 or 2 other people on 2 wheels versus dozens on 4. Thrifting. It's all bought up by resellers for online shops or flat out doesn't exist anymore. I remember not even 10 years ago I could walk into Flashbacks on 5th in Hillcrest and flip through dozens of retro disco Palista shirts and baggy faded 90s tees. Now you go to Goodwill and it's all fast fashion mall crap. Some of the thrift stores around here have boutique prices. It's insane how expensive some of these places have gotten. Sports card collecting conventions used to be a huge thing. Now maybe a few greyhairs get together to trade, buy, and sell. Model trains. Who has the space or the time anymore? Building theremins at home. I think city building sims like Cities Skylines sort of fill the same niche as model trains. If you've ever seen the level of work and detail into cities built with tons of mods and custom 3D models, the comparison makes sense. I wonder if you could even call it a hobby, but the BSA Scouting has dropped off hard in the US in the past few years. The change from the Boy Scouts of America to Scouting BSA had some positive change in numbers, but for the most part it's dying out. 20 years ago my small town had 4 Boy Scout troops, one of them with at least 40 boys, although rumors claim 80. Today, there's one troop left with sub 15 scouts in it, and the village government recently requisitioned our building for meetings too. We used to turn out consistent Eagle Scouts with every guy who had stayed until they were 18. But since I got Eagle in very early 2020 there have been some guys that failed to get Eagle. It'd be wonderful to be able to turn things around. But most people in our troop and the organization as a whole just aren't able to put time in anymore. Kids just aren't interested in getting merit badges. Tuner cars. Yes, the community still exists, but the days of throwing a cold air intake and some springs on your Civic are long gone, and it's only for people with deep pockets now. It doesn't help that the supply of affordable, lightweight, entry-level performance cars is basically zero now. And the ones left over from the 90s and early zeros are so supply constrained you need to be able to produce at least $10k in cash just to buy one anymore. Never mind the cost of parts has gone up substantially too. I'm holding out hope that the first gen BRZFRS/86 ends up bringing it back somewhat, but they're not cheap enough, still around $15k for something with 80k on it, nor produced in large enough numbers. I'm in central PA and there's a lot of Fast and Furious wannabes here. They're all tuning up VWs, mostly GTIs and older Jettas. I'm still waiting to spot a restored Corrado. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.